All right, let's get into it. We're going to get into it pretty quick here. We are going to be speaking today about how if you are not setting goals, you are missing the boat. And we are going to be getting into this to talk about really the importance of goal setting, the importance of what it can actually do for your career, and just how this is such a crucial part of actually growing and developing as a person, honestly, more so than even just an athlete. But we're going to speak obviously to the benefits of this for athletes themselves. Now, we're going to get into it pretty quickly, but before we start the show here, I just want to remind you all, if you have tuned into the show before, if you have gotten value from the show before, make sure to leave us a review. Make sure to send me a message. Follow me on all my social media accounts. You can do that through the comment section here. And as soon as you do that, make sure that you are sending me a message. You are sending me, thoughts about the show, any value you took away. And on top of that, make sure to leave a review for the show as well if you have not done so already. So we are going to get into it. We're going to be talking about how if you are not setting goals, you are missing the boat. And we're going to get started here in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the number one show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we're going to be talking about how if you are not setting goals, you are missing the boat. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking right away when I say that. Of course I'm setting goals. Everybody has a goal. I want to be a UFC champion. I want to, compete at this level. I want to train here. I want to do this. I want to do that. Everybody, hopefully, already has basic goals for their career. What we're going to be talking about today is we are going to be talking about weekly goals and monthly goals, because these are the process-focused items that allow you to achieve the ultimate goals you have for your career. So the first thing I want you to look at when you are setting weekly and monthly goals, well, first, let's go into why. Let's go into why you want to set goals on such a micro scale in order to achieve the macro of what you want throughout your entire career. And you don't want to be just focused on those actual ultimate goals for your career. So the reason you want weekly or monthly goals is because this is going to give you smaller things you can work towards, smaller things you can achieve. And in turn, this is going to lead you along the path to those ultimate goals for your career. So what do I mean when I say that? Like, if you're sitting here right now, let's say you are as an example, 20-year-old amateur MMA fighter, and your goal is to be a UFC champion. Right now, let's say you're 2-1 as an amateur. And so if you're sitting here in that position right now, you're 2-1 as an amateur, you want to be a professional down the road one day, you want to not only be a professional, but be a UFC champion, that is a very, very, very long way away for you. And I don't mean to say that to discourage you. I hope you keep pushing towards it. I hope you understand that it is possible for you, because every UFC champion at this present moment was at one point where you are, a young amateur with only a little bit of experience. So how did they go from who they were then to who they are now? And this is why we want monthly goals. So as an example, when you're sitting down to set monthly goals, the thing that I want you to think about, the thing I want you to get into right away, is look at not only where you're weakest in your game, but look at where you're weakest in your life. And what do I mean when I say that? So for a lot of people, when it comes to where they're weakest in their lives, it would be something like time management. They work hard, they like training, they train a lot, but they have trouble managing their time and fitting all their training in. So that would be an example of a weak area in your life compared to a weak area in your game, which would be, I'm a great striker, but I have no jiu-jitsu game, as an example. And obviously, I'm speaking MMA, but you can take these same concepts and apply them to whatever sport you're training for as well. So we're going to look at where you're weakest in your game and where you're weakest in your life. So just to keep the example simple, we're going to use exactly what I said there. Where I'm weakest in my game, well, right now I am a great striker, but I have no ground game whatsoever, no jiu-jitsu game whatsoever. If somebody gets me to the ground, it's game over. So if I am going to become a UFC champion one day, I need to fix that. And when it comes to, weakness in my life, let's say it's time management. Let's say I love to train hard, but I'm disorganized and I miss training because things pop up in everyday life and, I can't make it to all my sessions. So let's say those are the two major things that we want to work on right now. So the next step in order to properly set these weekly and monthly goals, we're going to stick to monthly, but you can break this down even further into weekly, is you've got to have an actual outcome that you're chasing that month. And so as an example, well, outcome might be the wrong word, but you've got to have, what you are actually going to do that month to improve it. You don't want to just sit there and say, well, you don't want to just sit there and say, well, my ground game is a mess, so I've got to improve it. You don't want to just sit there and say, well, my time management is a mess, so I've got to improve it. You want to actually have something you are going to do in order to improve it, something you can look back on at the end of this month and say, I made XYZ changes, and in turn, I am going to be able to improve that quality that I'm looking to improve. So when it comes to the ground game, we can break that down even further. What area are you struggling with in your ground game? And so if you can pick out what area is actually the trouble, now when it comes to setting that monthly goal, you can say, as an example, I'm going to go to 3 jiu-jitsu classes a week and make sure that I'm spending, 20 minutes or 30 minutes at the end of every class focused on improving these 3 pieces of my game that are the issue right now. And when you look back at the end of the month, if you were able to stick to that goal of going to 3 classes a week and making sure you're spending that extra 30 minutes at the end of each class focused on those areas, now you're going to look back at the end of the month. First, you're going to have improved in that area. And second, you're going to have actually stacked that extra little win in your head, knowing that when you set your mind to something, you achieve it. Does that make sense? So we want to have something that we are actually going to be able to look back and say, I did it or I didn't. Because there are going to be some skills that are just harder to master. I'm not saying that you spend a month working on your ground game and all of a sudden all your problems go away, but you're going to be able to look back at that and see actual incremental improvements, which is what we're after right now. So instead of focusing on, I'm going to be a UFC champion one day, you're focused on, I'm going to work on these 3 things this many times a week so that I can take a step closer to that goal of becoming a UFC champion. And so the same thing when it comes down to time management. What are you actually going to change? Well, instead of looking at it and saying, well, I'm just never going to miss a training session again, because if you struggle with time management, let's be honest, that's probably not realistic. Look at it and say, I'm going to set a routine every Sunday to plan out my week so that nothing comes up and surprises me during the week. Now, if you're able to do something like that, and obviously you can build that routine so it works for you, I'm not going to sit here and build out your time management routine. But if you build out a routine where every Sunday I sit down and I plan out my week, now what that should be able to do for you is that should be able to prevent things from popping up by surprise. And in turn, you're going to be able to actually get more out of every week because you're not missing training due to, something coming up in your everyday life as well. So where do people go wrong when setting goals like this? Because obviously it's easy for me to sit here and just say, hey, sit down and set goals every week. But the number one area I see people go wrong when they're setting weekly or monthly goals, especially for their athletic careers, is they set them way too high. Okay, so I need to improve my ground game. So many people sit there and go, okay, I'm going to do 2 hours of jiu-jitsu every single day. And let's be honest, you're a human being. If you have literally anything else on your schedule, you're not going to do 2 hours of jiu-jitsu every single day. But by setting that goal a little lower for the short term, you're going to be able to actually stick to it. And in turn, if you can actually stick to it throughout that short-term period, you're going to actually see improvement. But if you set that goal too high, you say, I'm going to do 2 hours on it every single day. I'm going to do this, do that, all these other crazy things. By the time you actually get to, trying to accomplish that, you're going to be a week in, you're going to be so exhausted and your life's going to be so backwards because you're trying to spend so much time on this one thing that you're not going to be able to stick to it. And in turn, your consistency is going to be off. And if your consistency is going to be off, now you're not actually going to see those results long term. So instead of trying to jump the ladder, instead of trying to go from, 20-year-old amateur 2-1 MMA fighter to what are the UFC champions doing, and I'm going to do that, start by improving where you're at right now. Start by making an incremental step to improve where you're at right now. I'll give you an example. When I started running my business, one of the things that, I had a lot of people say is you should have a morning routine. You should have, a list of things that you do every morning. It sets your day up for success. And the first probably 6 months, I struggled horribly with that. I would wake up and then I'd be rushed to get into the day and I wouldn't do the mindset stuff that I had set out. And then, it was horrible. I had such a tough time sticking to it because I had a list of about 10 things that I was trying to do every morning. So what I started doing is I broke it down and I said, okay, the first and only thing on my morning routine in the beginning was wake up at 6 a.m. And for 2 weeks, all I did was wake up at 6 a.m. every single day. And then from there, my day did what it would. If I wanted to get straight into work, I got straight into work. If I wanted to take a little bit of time to chill, I took a little bit of time to chill. But I stacked those wins and said, I'm going to commit to waking up at 6 a.m. every single day. And I did. And by doing that, it built the trust I needed to be able to add more to that routine. Now, my morning routine has 12 items on it that I do every single morning. I'm up at 4:30 in the morning and I go through that whole list of items and I don't miss it. And honestly, it was the best thing that I ever did for my business. By the time 7 a.m. rolls around, I've done more than a lot of people have in their entire day because I have that religious routine that I stick to no matter what. And so you guys, when you're setting goals, when you are, building this future for yourselves, you need to do it the same way. You need to start with something manageable and then start to build off of it. You're not going to become a UFC champion overnight. So sit back, look at it and say, what can I improve about myself this month that's going to put me closer to that ultimate goal of becoming a champion? Now, the framework in order to actually sit down and set these goals is very important as well, because like I said, we want them to be achievable and we want them to be measurable. You want to sit down and say, I'm going to sit down every single Sunday, plan out my week and set weekly goals. And then at the end of the month, if you look back and you said, okay, I did that on 2 Sundays and I didn't do that on 2 other Sundays. Now, okay, I haven't stuck to that plan. So I need to review, figure out why I haven't stuck to that plan and have it again for next month. If you look back and you say, I planned out my week every single week, it helped me a ton, I was way more organized, awesome. This is now part of your routine. Keep doing it, but next month, add something else that's going to continue to push you further towards that goal. So the framework of how we set these goals, like I said, is extremely, extremely important. But what I want you guys to really remember is that these goals should be pushing you towards your ultimate career goals. So as an example, time management, how is that pushing you towards being a UFC champion? Well, as a UFC champion, you've got media obligations to attend to. You've got tons of training hours to attend to. You've got recovery sessions with physiotherapists, massage therapists, chiropractors, etc. You've got likely some other side businesses going on to help make you some more money out of fighting. And if you are not effectively managing your time, things drop off. And if things drop off, what happens? Either you're losing your belt and then no one cares about you anymore, or the side businesses you have start to go to crap. But whatever it is, things start dropping off. And if things are dropping off because you're not managing your time well, you're stressed, you're not putting the time you need to into training, and in turn, you're not continuing on towards those ultimate goals you have for your career. So when you are sitting down to figure out what you are going to make your monthly goals, figure out how they are going to actually push you towards becoming that next level version of yourself, towards becoming that UFC champion, whatever it is you see in your future. And if every one of those goals you're setting is pushing you a step in that direction, now every single month you're making improvement. And then 12 months from now, when you're 21 years old, you're looking back and you're going, wow, I'm an entirely different person from where I was a year ago. And that entirely different person is 12 months closer to becoming a UFC champion like I've set out to be. Does that make sense? So simply by adding in that intention and adding in that intentional effort towards, I want to achieve this and this is how I'm going to do it. Now you're making more intentional steps than the guy or the girl that's just sitting there saying, I'm going to be a UFC champion one day because I train hard. It's like, yeah, that's obviously very important. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you don't need to train hard because that would be fucking stupid. But by putting the intention towards every area of your life, you're setting yourself up for more success because not only are you training hard, but you're learning how to manage the pressures. You're learning how to manage every other piece of that position before you actually get there. So the other thing I want you guys to keep in mind, I keep looking down at the notes here. The other thing I want you guys to keep in mind when you are setting these goals is, again, look at the actual outcome that you are looking to change. So what are the top changes that you need to make in order to put you closer to that goal? So again, going back to the example of 20-year-old amateur MMA fighter that wants to be a UFC champion one day, your goal right now probably shouldn't be to master the fanciest looking combination or anything like that, because if you're 3 fights into your career, what are the chances you're actually going to need that combination? Whereas if your goal is show up to 5 training sessions a week without missing and religiously stick to my recovery routine on Saturdays, now you're building the base, you're building the fundamentals, you're building that hierarchy of needs that an athlete at the top level actually needs to have. Because it's cool to have all of those cool moves and fancy stuff and all of that, but you need to pick your moment. It's cool to master that stuff once the fundamentals are like fully ingrained into your brain. But in the beginning stages of your career, stop focusing on the fancy, cool looking shit and start focusing on mastering the basics and building your foundation. Because if you're doing that, you're going to set yourself up to succeed. And then the cool looking shit is going to be a nice addition on top of a great athlete. But if you try to start at the top, you try to start with, the Showtime kick off the side of the cage, you're going to fall flat on your face if you're not strength training regularly, if you're not eating well, if you're not recovering well, if you're not mastering basic combinations before trying to do things like that. Because if you don't have the fundamentals down to a freaking science, the chances of you being in a position where that Showtime kick is going to ever actually be useful is so low. I cannot possibly express to you how pointless it is to be trying to work on that if you don't have the fundamentals on lockdown. So that is weekly and monthly goal setting, why it is important, why if you are not doing it, you are missing the boat. So I hope you gained a little bit of something from that. I hope that was valuable. If it was, make sure to drop a comment if you're here right now. Make sure that you are leaving a review for the podcast and sending me a message and letting me know what you took away. I always love hearing what you guys are learning from this show. It means a lot to me. That is why there are over 200 episodes out, and we are going to be continuing it 5 times a week for the foreseeable future. So I appreciate all of you that take the time to tune in, all of you that take the time to send me messages and let me know what you took away, all of you that are just supporting the show, sharing it with friends, learning from it. It means the absolute world to me. So let's keep this thing going. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk again tomorrow.